Welcome to the Three Down Nation podcast for our weekly picks edition. I'm John Hodge, joined by JC the Jumbo Cheese Abbott, who went 4-0 straight up last week. JC, you would have gone 4-0 against the spread, but you and I both got absolutely you-know-whatted over that Hamilton-Edmonton game where the Elks covered by half a point. I feel like we got ripped off.
Well, I think the Elks also feel like they got ripped off because they would have won that game if they had dropped an open touchdown pass in the end zone. So maybe everyone can commiserate together.
Yeah, that's the second time that Kale and Julian Grant has done that this season, and that is not good. When your job is to receive the ball, you got to receive the ball, especially when you're by yourself in the end zone. But I digress. The Elks will get a second crack at a win under Cody Fajardo this week, and we've got all the picks and more. A third crack. Oh, right, with the 3 starts. That's true. A third crack. Well, they get another crack, and it'll be an interesting one. We got a couple of
I just have the
divisional
one crack.
games. Oh, please don't talk about your crack. We've got a couple of interdivisional games. We've got a couple of divisional games. All 4 home teams favored this week, which is interesting. We'll see if some of these teams can make some hay on the road. Starting with the Hamilton Tiger Cats are 3.5-point home favorites against the BC Lions on Thursday night. The Tiger Cats are the hottest team in the CFL, riding a 6-game winning streak, though they'll have to overcome a short week against the Lions as they're playing on only 5 days of rest. BC, meanwhile, is well rested coming off a bye and appears to be relatively healthy. Not a lot of roster changes from before their bye. The last time these two teams met was 2 weeks ago when the Lions coughed up a 10-point lead after the 3-minute warning. Can BC avoid a similar fate in Steeltown?
I think they can. And it comes down to that rest factor, right? It is tough to beat a team coming off a bye when you are on a short week, especially when that team coming off a bye has had to do nothing except prep for you again because you were the last team they played before the bye. I think that gives the BC Lions a big advantage here. I think the defense in particular has done some soul searching, has moved some of the existing pieces around in order to put guys in more comfortable positions to stop this Hamilton offense and not just focus on Kenny Lawler. And the reality is the BC Lions were the better team for a large chunk of that first game. They just coughed it up at the end. So I think on the road, well rested, they can come out there, have a better, more complete performance, and Hamilton is due to drop one.
Yeah, the rest factor here is huge, JC. There's no doubt about that. The last time we had one team on a short week and the other team on a bye, the team that was on a short week actually went into the opponent's stadium and won by 21 points. That was the Calgary Stampeders a few weeks ago visiting the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, which was a shocker. I don't see the Lions winning this game, but I do see them keeping it very close. And by the way, I think Steeltown needs to be whining to the schedule makers. Like this team, 3 straight road games. The last 2 were their furthest road trips of the year in Vancouver, then in Edmonton. Now they're home, great, but it's a short week. That said, should be a great crowd in Hamilton for this one. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, NBA champion, MVP, local hero, will be there for this game. I think that adds something to the Tabbies. And then again, they've just been so darn good as of late. Arguably the best offensive line in the CFL. Bo Levi Mitchell, the MOP front runner for my money right now. Kenny Lawler, Keandre Smith having brilliant seasons. And then defensively, they're also doing a great job of limiting opposing teams right now, generating some takeaways. And Mark Leggio has quietly been absolutely brilliant on teams. And Isaiah Wooden has given this team an added dimension, I think, on special teams that they were missing. Certainly last season, potentially early on in this season when they started 0-2. I'm happy to take the Tabbies to win. With the rest factor, however, I'm going to take the BC Lions to cover. I think this is a field goal type of game, so I am taking that spread right on that 3.5 line. I think the Tabbies win this one by a field goal.
The Montreal Alouettes are 4.5-point home favorites against the Edmonton Elks on Friday night in a game that will pit Cody Fajardo and McLeod Bethel Thompson against their old teams. The veteran quarterbacks were traded for one another this offseason and are both starting as Davis Alexander is hurt in La Belle Province and Trey Ford has been benched in Edmonton. Can the Elks snap a 3-game losing skid to get back in the race in the West Division? Or will the Alouettes bounce back from last week's embarrassing loss to Saskatchewan?
I think the Alouettes have to be better this week, JC, but when you look at their injury report, Marc-Antoine Dequoy is out, Kabion Ento is out. Like, this secondary is beat up. There's a reason they went out and added a former East Division All-Star in Brandon Dandridge. They picked up Seontae Evans, who's now in his third stint with the Montreal Alouettes. By the way, a niche 3-down article I would love to write is players who had 3 or more different stints with the same CFL team. Seontae Evans now makes that list for the Owls. That being said, I am picking the upset here, and I might regret this, but the Edmonton Elks are going to get their second win of the season at some point. Right now, they have the league's last ranked defense, but the Alouettes have been terrible on offense the last few games under McLeod Bethel Thompson. This is the classic tale of what happens when a very stoppable force meets a totally movable object. And right now, as much as the Elks, again, have not put up a ton of fight, I have to believe that defensive line is going to start making hay at some point. Justin Lawrence, an excellent center, looks to be out for the Alouettes. That could help the Elks potentially get some pressure on McLeod Bethel Thompson. And we all know that McLeod Bethel Thompson has not done a good job controlling the football as of late. Yeah, he only had 1 pick this past week against the Saskatchewan Roughriders, but he had multiple other throws that frankly should have been caught by members of that Roughriders secondary. We should have seen more takeaways from the Riders, and they didn't take advantage. So to me, I see the Elks going into Montreal and getting the upset win here. I just think the Alouettes have fallen. They can't get up. Bethel Thompson not sharp enough. Cody Fajardo has been the better of the 2 QBs as of late, and he's got, I think, better weapons around him, especially with, again, how banged up that Alouettes receiving core is. So give me the Elks, a decision I will probably be regretting at this time next week when we do our Week 11 picks.
Well, I'm scared too because I'm in the same boat as you. I think the Elks can pull off this upset, and we both might be going down with the ship. To me, it just comes down to quarterbacks. Like you said, Cody Fajardo has been the better player than McLeod Bethel Thompson, and while that hasn't necessarily translated to wins, he has been a very effective quarterback the last 2 games for them. And I think he's going to be fired up for this one. A return to Montreal, the city where he took him to a Grey Cup. He was named the MVP, where he feels slighted. I think Cody Fajardo gets fired up for those type of matchups. And unlike the one we saw against Saskatchewan a few weeks ago, there hasn't been several years to sort of salve the wounds of that departure. This was immediate. It was this offseason. And you're seeing the guy that they effectively replaced you with on the other side struggling, right? I think that's going to result in a strong offensive performance, if nothing else, from the Edmonton Elks. And I don't trust McLeod Bethel Thompson to generate much more than field goals for the Alouettes offense. I'm taking the Elks, and I'm going to take them. I would take them if they were favored here as well.
Wow. Well, we'll see. Next week, we might both be regretting our decision, but one way to find out. The Toronto Argonauts are 2.5-point home favorites over the Ottawa Redblacks on Saturday afternoon. Both teams sit at 2-6, and they need to get things going if they are to thwart a potential crossover situation come playoff time. The Argonauts won the first meeting between these two teams in June, though Drew Brown was unavailable for the Redblacks. If Ottawa wins this week by more than 13 points, they can still capture the season series. If Toronto wins or loses by less than 13 points, the season series will be theirs. JC, which of these two teams will kick it into gear this week?
I think the Toronto Argonauts are going to get it done because I've been impressed with them in their last 2 games against Winnipeg. Obviously, they didn't win both of those matchups, but even last week, I thought they were largely the better team. They just got bitten by a couple of mistakes on special teams and some protection issues. I don't know if the offensive line group that they brought in this week, Brandon Kemp, Ryan Seaver, are going to be ready to go and play in this game, but I think there's progress happening on that front. I don't think Ottawa has played particularly well despite the victory over a downtrodden or depleted, I should say, Calgary team last week that had its backup quarterback and essentially none of its regular receiving core in the game. That doesn't impress me that much. I still think they have a lot more to prove. And I think Toronto has done more impressive things to this point in the season that I trust them to get the edge over the Redblacks in this matchup.
I've got Ottawa this week, and it's because I think they're finally starting to get healthy. This was the most battered and bruised team in the CFL, though the Argonauts admittedly could have given them a run for their money early on this season. And I just think that between Drew Brown, we know Justin Hardy has been banged up. He's got a back injury. That's potentially a concern. But when you look at all the other guys, along the offensive line who have come back for the Ottawa Redblacks on the defensive side of the ball, guys like Davian Taylor, like they're finally starting to get healthy in some key spots. And I think there's no better way to get that pass rush going. A unit that's been, frankly, I think quite disappointing, right? It was one of the best defensive lines of the CFL last year. They ran it back with Bryce Carter, Lorenzo Malden, Michael Wakefield, who I think is one of the most underrated players in the CFL. That unit has not been going well. We just saw last week Winnipeg's defensive front that had not had a ton going in the pass rush department absolutely decimated that Toronto Argonauts offensive line. And yes, the Argonauts, as you said, JC, added a couple of bodies to that O-line this week. I don't think that's going to help, at least not in the very short term. I think they're going to roll out the same unit this week. If they're not rolling out the same unit, they're going to be rolling out a bunch of guys who are rusty and who aren't familiar with the other players around them. So I think the Redblacks are going to be able to generate pressure on Nick Arbuckle as long as this team can control DeMonte Coxey, who was a one-man wrecking crew last week against the Bombers. The Winnipeg had simply no response for him. I think the Redblacks can not only win this game, but I think they can even potentially win by enough to capture the season series against the Toronto Argonauts. The Argonauts are still battered up. Quentin McManus is still limited in practice. That is a problem for them. Defensively, they have not generated a ton of pressure as of late. They got some sacks on Chris Streveler. Those were all coverage sacks, in my opinion, for the most part this past week at Princess Auto Stadium. So I will take the Redblacks. I think they're the better team right now, and I think that the Redblacks will win this game at BMO Field.
The Calgary Stampeders are 5-point home favorites over the Winnipeg Blue Bombers on Saturday night. Both teams appear set to get significant reinforcements back for this matchup, as Vernon Adams Jr. and Clark Barnes were full participants in practice this week for Calgary, while the Blue Bombers appear set to get back Zach Collaros and Stanley Bryant. The Stampeders already own the season series against Winnipeg, having swept the first two meetings by a combined 42 points. And Calgary do it again this week.
Hey, you fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I've picked the Winnipeg Blue Bombers to beat the Stampeders twice this season, and I'm not doing it. And I got bitten by that last week because I picked the Argos. But as you said, JC, 2 special teams touchdowns and a defensive touchdown for the Bombers in that game. Based on the performance of just their offense, they should have lost. And the fact that they won and did so by 9 points, I'm not saying wasn't an earned win. They did earn it, but there were some pretty, I don't want to use the word fluky. Let's put some rare circumstances, right? It's very rare. You're going to get 3 non-offensive touchdowns in the same game, and that's what the Bombers got last week. I am bullish on some of the changes that they've made. Their secondary was a lot better last week. The few explosion plays to DeMonte Coxey aside, after shuffling a bunch of guys around there, it looks like Dexter Lawson Jr. is going to get the start at field corner. I think that's an upgrade over Marquise Bridges. And I think it looks like Dylan Mitchell is finally out of roster jail after finally being demoted from the 1-game injured list as a healthy scratch to the practice roster. Based on the practice reps, it looks like he will be getting the start for this team, which I think will be a boost. And then obviously Zach Collaros, not a great season so far, 7 touchdowns to 8 picks, but he is certainly better than Chris Streveler. So I will take the Winnipeg Blue Bombers to look better in this game. I think they keep it close, but I am going to pick the Calgary Stampeders to win, and I am actually going to pick them to cover this 5-point spread. I think the Bombers can keep it within 7, within 8. It'll be a 1-score game, but I simply cannot bring myself to pick the Bombers for a third time in this matchup with VA healthy. If VA wasn't back, I'd be rolling with the Bombers, but VA is back. He's been great. He has been the straw that stirs the drink in Cowtown. I got to tip my hat to the Calgary Stampeders. Give me them to win and to narrowly cover this spread.
With VA back, I've got to back the Stampeders because they've been, I think, the most impressive team when he's been healthy in the CFL this season. I think he brings a dimension that PJ Walker sadly lacked last week, and I don't think that was representative of what this Stampeders team truly is. But with that said, I don't know that just the return of Clark Barnes is going to be enough in that receiving core for them to be at full capacity, right? They're missing a lot of pieces there. Even when VA was last playing, it was Damian Alford who was the top target. Doesn't appear like he's going to be playing in this game. I think there's still holes on that offense, and that brings that score line down, in my opinion. It's not going to be another blowout, and I will take the Winnipeg Blue Bombers to keep this close and to cover the 5-point spread. I think it comes down to a field goal in this game, perhaps a backdoor cover if you want to be truly optimistic about the Stamps, but I don't think it's going to be a blowout like we've seen before.
One more note on this one. It does look like Adam Big Hill could potentially make his Calgary Stampeders debut, which would be somewhat poetic, of course, given the fact that he would be playing against the team with which he won 2 Grey Cups and 2 Most Outstanding Defensive Player awards over a 6-year stint. So it'll be interesting to see if Biggie's in the lineup. I'm sure if you're the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, you'd be very happy if maybe Biggie waited one more week before he was ready to play, coming off the torn ACL he suffered in last year's Labor Day Classic. For JC Abbott, I'm John Hodge. Those are our picks for Week 9 in the Canadian Football League, Week 10 in the Canadian Football League, my apologies, straight up and against the spread. We'll be back next week for Week 11. We'll see you then.